Hey everyone, I'm Michaela. Today I want to talk about being sick. Have you ever been so sick that you had to keep your distance from other people? Or maybe you've had a loved one get sick with something and you had to stay away from them for your own safety. I remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, my brother caught COVID and he chose to stay at a friend's house who was also sick so that he wouldn't get his wife sick. She was sad and missed him, but she knew it was temporary and for her own good. I also remember that during the pandemic, it was super hard for me in particular. The place where I worked decided to move everything online so the staff could quarantine and try not to get sick or get others sick. So I stayed home for all of spring and summer, and I worked from home. But I live alone, so that means I went for like 6 months without touching another human. It wasn't until my brother came to visit me in the fall that I had my first hug. Thank goodness I had my puppy Kiki to keep me company, or I might have lost it. In the Bible, there were a few people that had similar experiences, except way worse. It was way worse than waiting out a cold or quarantining for 6 months. There was a community of people who had developed a sickness called leprosy. Leprosy is what people in the Bible days called a serious skin disease we now know as Hansen's disease. It can be very contagious, so people were very careful to try not to catch it. Scientists believe it gets passed from person to person by coughing or sneezing. Now, back in the day, leprosy was also a catch-all name for other unknown skin diseases that the general public did not want to catch. People who had leprosy were instant outcasts. They got banished to the edges of town and had to live in a whole separate community of already sick people. No one talked to them. No one visited them. In fact, when these folks who were sick had to go into town, they were made to yell, "Unclean, unclean," so that people would keep away from them. It was a terribly isolated life until Jesus entered the scene. See, where some people did things one way, Jesus constantly showed a different way to do things. As Jesus was traveling around and teaching and sharing his message, he also stopped to heal people. One time, a man with leprosy came up to Jesus and kneeled before him and said this, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." The sick person had faith, not that Jesus would heal him, but that Jesus could heal him, if it was in his will. Jesus' response was to reach out and actually touch this sick person and say, "I am willing, be healed." And that's exactly what happened. The sick man was healed. It's significant that Jesus reached out to touch this person. You can imagine this person had been sick and isolated for so long, dealing with shame, fear, and loneliness. It was the worst kind of quarantine possible, and yet Jesus reached out to touch this person, and then he healed him. It wasn't just the healing in this instance, it was the recognition of that person's struggle and humanity that happened before the healing. In another instance, Jesus was traveling, and when he reached the edge of the city, he encountered a group of people with leprosy, because like we mentioned earlier, these folks were forced to the edge of town because of their sickness. A group of 10 people who had leprosy began calling out to Jesus. Here's what happened. As Jesus continued on toward Jerusalem, he reached the border between Galilee and Samaria. As he entered a village there, 10 men with leprosy stood at a distance, crying out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." He looked at them and said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed of their leprosy. There's a pattern here. Jesus repeatedly encountered some of the instant outcasts in society, the people who were forced to the side, ignored, and struggling because their health was failing. These are the people Jesus chose to look in the eye when no one else would, and he showed up for them. Then he healed them. That's the beauty of it all. Jesus didn't let sickness separate people from his love. And that's true even today. Sickness doesn't separate us from the love of Christ. So whatever that thing is that makes you feel far away or isolated, Jesus wants to bridge that gap like he did by looking at those who were sick, seeing their humanity, and choosing to love, care, and show up for them. Jesus sees you in your isolation, in your fear, confusion, or sickness, and he won't let that separate you from him or his love. So be bold, be brave, share those things with Jesus, and let him comfort you and care for you in the various beautiful ways that only Jesus can.